Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first developer meetup of 2026. We are super excited to have you here today and very, very excited to kick off this new year with you all diving into UI agents. I'm Lou, and today I'm here with the wonderful Pratyush, and we're super pumped to explore how to wrap these agents into your automation workflow and just so much more today. So, this is going to be a great session. As people are trickling in, please drop in the chat where you're joining in from. I am currently in Denver, Colorado, and it's cold today, but not as cold as what's happening on the eastern side of the states, oddly enough. Pratyush, where are you joining from?
I'm in San Jose, California. I can't complain. It's been a bit cold last couple of days, but today the weather looks pretty good.
Nice, nice. Yeah, we got some snow yesterday. I'm actually in the process of moving and woke up to like 4 inches of snow, which was fun.
Nice.
Yeah, so making it exciting for sure. Let me dive into this really quick. So, super short plug. We may make some forward-looking statements, so please base all of your purchasing decision on current capabilities. And before we get started, I wanted to talk some Pathfinder news. I have 4 upcoming events that you should all check out if you are able. On January 27th, Mike and I will be hosting Automation Anywhere's quarterly innovation showcase. This is for devs and automation leads. Come ready to get a sneak peek of what's coming in the latest release and see some of our coolest innovations highlighted. We'll also be introducing the Acera team, so you'll definitely want to attend this to see some solid Micah banter, but also get really deep with some super cool features. If you are in Bangalore, Shreya is hosting an in-person meetup on the 31st. Food is provided, so come get lunch, connect with others in the industry, and see some of the cool things we've been working on lately. If you want some automation inspo, join the Scaling Intelligent Automations user group on February 19th with Albertsons. They're doing really great things over there, and I'm really excited to see them walk through it and showcase their wins. I think it will be inspirational, and they've had some really great wins, so we definitely want to highlight them. And finally, on February 11th, I'm hosting a product club where we will explore how the universal webhook listener dramatically expands the breadth of SaaS-based use cases that can be automated in real time. So you'll want to check that out. You can find and register for all of the events in that cute little QR code in the phone picture, or just choose the one that stands out to you the most. I will also be pasting the links in the chat in just a second. But first, let's go ahead and meet Pratyush. Pratyush, thank you so much for coming today and agreeing to share your brilliance with us. We're very appreciative. Before getting started, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? What's your role here at Automation Anywhere, and how long have you been in the industry?
Sure. Thanks, Lou. Thanks for having me, and thank you all for joining in. Uh, Pratyush Verkapati, I'm a director of product here at Automation Anywhere, primarily focused on our AI capabilities and a couple of product lines. Been here with the company for about 4 years. This is probably my fourth product that I'm launching in the company. So exciting times. Been in the industry for about 20 years, primary expertise spreading across digital transformation, running large scale transformation programs across IT and various different automation COEs, and of course, product management.
Awesome. Thank you. And then I want to lean into the fact that we're in a new year, but before we talk about resolutions, I wanted to take a second and think back to how far we've come, last year in particular, but also, 3 or 4 years ago. What's one innovation that you really enjoyed seeing come to fruition?
That's a good question. I think largely, if I look back across Automation Anywhere, one thing I'm really proud of is how we as a company and as a team have really pivoted and have leaned in and leading the entire agentic process automation narrative, right? So making sure that the platform is retrofitted and actively engaged and is able to accommodate all the new innovations that are happening in the industry around agentic automation, AI agents, and building the ecosystem around it. That's really what the entire company has been focused on. Personally, I'm really proud to see how far Copilot for Automators or Automated AI as a capability and product has really come forth. It started off on I would say, a shaky foot, and as a product manager, I must acknowledge where things worked and did not work. But it has come a long way, and now I'm pretty happy to say that if I stack rank it against equivalent capabilities that exist out there in the industry across our immediate competitors and adjacent competitors, it definitely comes out on top. And its primary mission was always to help developers, and that's what it has stayed true at. It has been consistently helping developers. We have several internal benchmarks proving exactly that. And I'm excited to continue that journey and work with developers to make it even better.
Yeah, I just want to highlight to everyone on the call, it is so fun to be here at this company and just see the emails and the Teams messages that come through with all of the exciting new things. And it's not like it happens, once a quarter. It's happening every day. So it's really, really cool to be here and to see all of these innovations in real time as they evolve. Now, Pratyush, I want us to look forward for a second since we just looked back. What is a 2026 New Year's resolution for you?
I've never been big on New Year resolutions. I'm more focused on just get it done, and that's really what I intend to continue. I mean, we are pretty close to launching UI agents as a formal, generally available capability that's coming out in a couple of months. There are a few other innovations that are already lined up. But personally, and again professionally, I think one thing that's true now, especially in this very interesting times that we live in, is every single day is an opportunity to learn,
hmm
improve, and innovate. And that's a lesson I keep reminding myself, and I think everybody here should also just continue focusing on that.
Yeah, amazing. I love that. Yeah, I'm pumped for the new year and excited to see everything that our team brings to the table. So with that, I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to kick it over to you to go ahead and get started.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. And Lou, for Q&A, are folks gonna put things in the chat or in the Q&A tab? Where do you want them to go?
Yeah, if you have a question, throw it in the chat. I'll be monitoring, so I will, Pratyush, I'll call to you and let you know when a question pops up.
Perfect. Lou, are you able to see my screen?
Yeah, we got it.
Perfect. All right, thank you all for joining in. The goal of today's meeting and today's session really is A, keep it interactive. Please let the questions keep coming. And B, we're going to talk about UI agents or computer use agents, if you will, if depending on which term you're familiar with. But most importantly, we'll talk about how it helps you, right? How does it really help you in delivering your automation projects? How does it help our customers? What are we really doing about this capability? And what does it mean from a broader automation technology stack perspective? So let's dive in. So to introduce UI agents to you, UI agents is essentially a computer use agent capability, or for that matter, an AI agent that allows you to automate any browser-based task. Now, typically you have been automating browser-based activities like say logging into a website or filling up a form or running a multi-step workflow on a browser through traditional RPA technologies. The new technology that's coming forth in the industry with the advent of large action models and large language models is operating the browser just like a human would, or just like building an automation workflow on a browser, but using prompt as a primary input and letting the agent figure out at runtime what it needs to do without you being overtly specific or programmatically configuring what the automation needs to do. So from that standpoint, UI agents or computer use agents, depending on, like I said, which terminology you prefer, are adaptive and resilient by nature. They navigate a web application with human-like understanding. They look at the content on the screen at runtime, determine how to navigate, where to click, where to enter data, where to read content. All of the decision is happening at runtime, which means, like I said, you're not programmatically configuring all the different X paths or DOM paths, basically saying, go click here, go read content from there. That's something agent determines automatically and performs the actions that you're given it until that goal is completed, right? With UI agent, what we also have done is we have deeply integrated that into our platform, which means that you can not just perform browser-based activities, but just like before, you can now automate your end-to-end workflows more efficiently and effectively. That means You can bring in your RPA workloads or non-browser workloads. Let's say you want to read a lot of data from an Excel or any other third-party applications or non-browser application, which could be a thick client. You can read the data, provide that information to the agent, and then agent goes and does whatever it needs to. Maybe you want to process payment information on 1,000 different websites. Maybe you want to read content of a Wikipedia page. Doesn't really matter. Ultimately, you can stitch this entire end-to-end workflow pretty easily in the framework that we are providing. And then finally, I think the immediate benefit that the developer community gets is your ability to build and maintain these kind of automations on a platform with UI agents is now significantly improved. Because the agents are performing these activities or basically executing your goal at runtime, your overall automation footprint or the complexity of your automation comes down significantly. Ergo, your speed to delivery increases. And also, your maintenance effort comes down significantly in a post-production scenario. So all in all, customers get several benefits in terms of ROI, accelerated delivery, lower maintenance efforts, and most importantly, you are now able to automate very complex workloads as well as very large-scale workloads in a very efficient manner. So let's spend a few seconds to talk about how a UI agent really works and some nuances around this. So if you're already dabbling with if you're already dabbling with AI agents, the overall framework should be familiar, which is effectively like any other AI agent, you provide a goal to the UI agent. The UI agent looks at that goal. It looks at the website's current state and does a calibration. It tries to figure out is the user goal, what is the user goal? What does the website look like right now? And then comes up with a plan of how to execute the user goal on that website. It then goes and proceeds to execute that plan. Maybe enter some information on a specific field, maybe click on a button, maybe do some page navigation, could be anything. That basically depends on the plan. Once it performs the action, it then basically reevaluates, is the user goal completed or not? If the user goal is completed, that's the end of the agent. If the user goal is not completed, it repeats that loop of observe, plan, act until the user goal gets completed. Now, this is important because usually for most enterprise use cases, you're not doing just form filling. You're not doing a single page interaction. You're probably doing, and most likely doing, multi-page interaction. You're doing login, then going to the home page, and from there navigating to a specific sub page and performing a bunch of activities. And you want to be able to do this, sorry, and you want to be able to do this at scale repeatedly. Therefore, this multi-step engagement or multi-step execution across different websites and even within different pages of a given website is where the fidelity of the UI agent becomes very important, because as long as the plan is accurate and as long as the ability for the agent to observe its current state is accurate, that really drives the overall fidelity or accuracy and reliability of the agent. Now, you may have seen several benchmarks out there in the industry where it says, you have a browser agent on benchmarks like OS World or benchmarks like browser bench, a certain model has scored 60% or 70% or 67%. Pick your favorite number. That's probably where the numbers are right now. But the question to really ask is a 60% success rate good enough for you? Meaning, in 60% of the time it works, but the other 40% of the time it fails, and you wouldn't even know it actually failed or not. So today, the state of market from a public benchmark perspective, or state of technology from a public benchmark perspective, is it's not nearly good enough for enterprise use cases where repeatability, fidelity, reliability is highly desirable. On the other hand, the state of the technology today externally is that it is pretty good for human in the loop because the human is overseeing all the different activities. That's one thing that we have very strongly focused on, wherein we are confident in saying that UI agents delivered by Automation Anywhere have a success rate of north of 80%, and even beyond that in some of the internal evaluations that we have done. Now, one of the other questions we also get is that how does it really differentiate against any other AI agent out there? Why can't I just throw a model, pick any favorite model that you may be working with and just implement the same loop? Want it work? The nuance here to understand is if I abstract the state of the market today or state of the technology today, there are two types of agents. And depending on whom you ask, you'll get different answers on this. But from my perspective, there are two types of agents. You have AI agents that can operate on a block of text or static images. And almost every single model out there that exists are probably suitable for doing any sort of text-based processing. There are a smaller subset, but very publicly available models out there that can also perform image-based reasoning. But there are even fewer models and a very short list of providers who can perform or who can build and run AI agents on a browser. Because browser or operating an agent on a browser requires very sophisticated understanding, reasoning, and like I said, various other enterprise requirements come into factor over here. And that's really the key difference to understand that you can't just throw any model to make it run on a browser. Basically, you need the model to have understanding of how to read a DOM, how to read a image that comes up on a browser while you're performing activities, how to do this in one single seamless loop, how to implement that autonomous reasoning while looping through that entire framework or entire website. So it's that agentic engineering on top of model that really comes together in UI agents that drives all the great aspects I called out about, reliability, repeatability, and so on. So that's how UI agents really work and how it really compares against a typical AI agent that exists out there in the market. Now, before I jump into the demo, I kind of wanted to give you a lay of the land of there's so many UI automation technologies out there. How do they really compare and stack rank? The way to think about this, or the rubric to really put forth on here, is think of this from a perspective of what's the modality you're dealing with, meaning are you dealing with thick clients, Windows based or desktop based applications, or are you dealing with browsers? Vis-a-vis, what kind of autonomous agency level do you really want to implement in your automation workload? If you're dealing with a requirement which the application doesn't change, it's largely rule based, or rather a use case that's really well fit for RPA, we already provide technologies like universal recorder, AI sense as part of our recorder capability. That's something that our customers already have access to. That's typically how RPA automations for browser have really evolved, or even for desktops have really evolved. The more recent capability that we launched about 2 years ago is from a fallback only perspective. That's really been Achilles heel of RPA in the traditional sense. And we launched Generative Recorder about 2 years ago, and we have been consistently improving that in the last 2 years, going from native resiliency to text-based resiliency to vision-based resiliency. And that means that your RPA automations or your recorder-based automations have the ability to recover from the point of failure using Generative Recorder. With the introduction of UI agents, you also now have the ability to add UI agent in that mix, which means that if your recorder, even after having recorder and generate recorder, despite that, if your UI automation step fails, you can throw in UI agent in the mix and do a natural language based recovery from that point onwards. And then, of course, if you go further to the right, which is fully autonomous agency, you can which is let's say for example you want to run a form filling task on 1,000 different websites, and I'm saying different websites, not the same website but 1,000 times, but entirely 1,000 different websites. At that scale, building recorder based automations becomes near impossible because the effort is significantly large. That's again where UI agent plays a very strong role, because it's goal based, which means you configure the goal, and regardless of what browser that goal is running on, it will figure out at runtime how it needs to process that information on that given browser. From a modality standpoint, UI agent and generative recorder are today available only on browsers. You of course have universal recorder and AI sense, or the recorder capabilities at large, available for both thick clients and browser. And we are working on making UI agents and generative recorder available for both modalities in future. So this is one rubric to keep in mind of how you can really look at different UI automation capabilities. You obviously have the choice to pick any one of these based on your requirements, based on cost implications, reliability considerations, performance considerations. There are various aspects to think about, which if there are any questions, happy to jump into or deep dive into. But yeah, this is it's a framework to keep in mind.
Okay.
Before I jump into a demo, any immediate questions in the chat?
Yeah, so we have a couple. We were asked the question, is this still in preview stage? Where can I get documentation of UI agents to understand this in more detail?
It's in private preview right now. We have, I would say, private GA more than private preview. We do have some live deployments already in place with a few customers, quite a few other customers that we are actively working with. If anybody is interested, if they can DM me or if they can reach out to me or email, happy to walk you through, share the documentation, walk you through the whole capability. We go officially GA in .40 release. That's April, if I recall correctly. So the documentation also will be made available around that time frame based on our release rollout schedule.
Okay, and so for everyone on this call, what I'll do towards the end, I will launch a poll. And if you're interested in taking part in that, I'll just ask for your name and then I'll send it over to Pratyush. We do have a couple of other questions. Is UI agent working for customers outside the US region?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And then, and I'm sure we're going to get into this, but someone wanted to understand some other use cases for this.
Yeah, I'll cover that as part of my presentation.
Okay, all right. That is it in the chat. Over to you.
Awesome. Let me switch screens over here. So let me first walk you through what it actually looks like. What does the build experience actually look like? Now, what we've done is we have basically made UI agents available as part of the same interface that you today build your automations in, right? And like before, I'm assuming everybody's familiar with the interface. You have the flow view, the list view. You can, drag and drop different kinds of command packages or connectors. And just like before, you have UI agent as one of the packages available over here. You can drag and drop that and make it available, for your automation. Now, the use case that you look at here is creating an invoice entry by first reading content from website one and then posting that information or creating that invoice in website two. The way we have designed the framework is for UI agent, there are basically three actions. You start the browser session, and it's important to start the browser session in the context of the UI agent so that you understand or so that the agent knows which browser it needs to run on. And we have made certain improvements over the traditional recorder, uh, which I'll call out in a few minutes. But when you start a session, you have the option of choosing which action model you want to work with. And we provide two different action models as part of the initial launch. We have Automation Anywhere Narada, which is an OEM capability that we have. And then we have Amazon Nova Act, which so far was in research preview. That recently went GA, and we also will, as part of the launch, we will change the terminology to make it make it easily available for our customers. What that means is that if, and I'll call out some of the differences in some of the action models that exist out there, as well as the two that you see over here. But what that really means is that Automation Anywhere Narada is a model that we are providing, which means it becomes available out of the box. Any customer who wants to use this model, we provision the access for that, and it becomes basically a SaaS capability. If a customer wants to use Amazon Nova Act, it's bring your own license, which means you can bring in your own license keys that you already have with AWS. This is typically well suited for customers who are heavily entrenched in AWS already. They can bring in their existing subscriptions, just plug in the keys, and you're good to go, right? So you choose your action model in the first step, and that really is determined by your use case. Now, the differences between these two are, I would say, in terms of the complexity of the use case, how much of are you, how much importance is fidelity or reliability of that execution? Are you running this in with human in the loop or unattended? Really is one way to look at it. Let's say if you want to run an unattended execution and accuracy is absolutely important. We will soon publish benchmarks on this, but you will see differences between both Nova Act and Automation Anywhere Narada on what the stack ranking looks like. Another way to think about this, or another lens to put on this in terms of choosing a model, and it's not necessary that it needs to be Nova Act versus Narada. In future, we'll provide more models. But once you have a list of models that you want to pick from, depending on the use case, depending on how simple or complex the use case is, how performant you want your execution to be, what kind of cost profile you're looking at, whether you're running this with human in the loop vis-a-vis unattended, in which case accuracy is an important aspect. All these are different factors for you to consider to determine which model best suits your requirement. So, like I said, we'll provide more guidance on this as we get closer to GA. The second step in terms of executing a UI agent is configuring your goal. Like I said, in this use case of creating invoice entry, we're doing two steps. Step one, reading content from a website. Now, this is my URL, and you'll see this running in a few minutes. But I'm basically telling it, open this URL. And once this URL is open, the goal is set the date filter, open the PDF that's visible on the screen, extract all the content from that PDF and basically save it or return it to me in a structured format, which makes it easy for me to ingest that in the next step. The next step is basically taking that structured format, which came out as a JSON, opening the second website, and, and basically pushing all the JSON content into the second website. Now, the goal, if you see here, in the previous step, my goal was set the date filter, extract all the details of the vendor, invoice, and line items from the PDF that opens up. In the second step, my goal is if you see pop-up, accept it. If you don't, obviously, and that's not explicitly mentioned, but the agent is sophisticated enough to understand that if you don't see a pop-up, you don't have to do anything. And essentially, I'm saying create a new invoice with all the data that I'm giving you from the previous step and just give me a confirmation number. That's basically it. And you can imagine if you were building this in a traditional, recorder style RPA automation, your automations would end up spanning maybe 10 different or 15 different steps. And then, of course, there's a maintenance aspect to consider in terms of exception handling, making sure it's not brittle, it's resilient in runtime. So that's your goal. And then finally, you close the browser session. Now, this is not mandatory. What that means is that you can weave in RPA-like steps. Your data could be coming from an Excel, and then you want to feed that to the agent. You can have the data output of the agent, feed that to another RPA-like step. You can, I mean, the complexity of your use case will really determine how complex your automation needs to get or your agentic process automation really needs to get. But all of those are different possibilities you can do with this framework. You can weave in UI agent and RPA in any combination that you want. You can also weave in UI agent and recorder in any combination you want, which means that let's say you want to first try recorder. Uh, and I may have a pattern out here, but I'll just talk through it. Let's say you want to first try recorder, but if recorder fails, you want to use UI agent, you can do that as well. Basically, in the same framework, you start the agent with the start session action, add the recorder action, and then do an exception handling, which means that if there's an exception that occurs, UI agent takes over. It's as simple as that. So we're going to run this automation. And again, in the interest of time, I'm just running a recorded demo, but we can do this live as well. Once the automation is deployed, and like any other scenario, right? Any other automation that you may have built and deployed in the past, what it does is that in this particular case, it launches the browser because that's what that's what we gave it to as a goal. The first step is opening that browser, the URL that we gave, and then performing or providing those instructions in the form of the goal. So it opens up this particular website. Here it's doing a date filter from all time to last 24 hours. It sees that there's a PDF. It opens the PDF, again, all goal based. Once the PDF opens, then I'll just pause here. This is where one of the differences comes in based on your choice of action model. Now, Automation Anywhere Narada has two levels of understanding. It can understand a browser through its DOM structure, which is what it did in the previous screen. When it was on the previous page, it was understanding the browser and the planning and action was being done through DOM. On this particular screen, where you have the PDF open, there's no DOM to access. Now, Automation Anywhere Narada also has vision capabilities built into the same agentic loop, which means the agent at runtime will determine whether it needs to use DOM or whether it needs to use vision. And it automatically and seamlessly switches between the two without you ever doing any manual intervention. Now, in the traditional sense, in the typical automation stack, you ideally would have built this automation through two different steps. You would have done recorder, and then you would have brought in probably document automation or any other preferred IDP solution that you may have already available in-house and weave the two together. Not that technically it's not possible, but it still is a significant development effort. So that's one of the benefits you get with this kind of a capability where by augmenting different technology stacks under the hood, your overall build effort, your ability to deliver this faster, it significantly increases. And the build effort, of course, comes down. Moving forward, so here I basically told the agent to extract the vendor details, the invoice details, and the line items from this in a JSON format. I did not specify a specific structure. That's something that, again, the agent has an understanding of. It automatically creates a structured JSON. Now, you don't necessarily have to do a JSON. It really is your choice. But JSON in general is a structured format, which makes it more machine ingestible in the follow-up step if you have a downstream step that you want to use this extracted output in. Otherwise, you can just, export this in a table or use different kinds of data format processing. The first step is done. Now we're on the next second step. Now you may have seen, if I just go back here for a second, Okay. Uh, this is a second website where a pop-up opens up. Our goal to the agent was if you see a pop-up, just accept it. That's what it basically did. It saw a pop-up, it accepted that. If it doesn't, it will just move forward. It now proceeds to create an invoice again through reasoning. We did not specify a pre-configured path. Now it's going to plug in the vendor details, the invoice details, and the line items that it got from the previous stream. And because there were multiple line items, it has an understanding that it needs to click on add line item, which again was not something we explicitly told it to, which means whether you have a single line item in your invoice, multiple line items, the agent has the ability to intelligently understand and execute on top of it. And finally, we asked for the reference number, which it's going to read and give me the reference number as a confirmation. So that's one example of how you can implement a UI agent in an agentic process automation framework. Now that you have built a task board where you have this UI agent running, you can take the task board, run it as part of a broader process. You can run it as a child board, which I'm sure most of you would have done. You can also make it available as part of a goal-based agent, which is a capability or a product that we recently launched, I think in the January release. So which means that you can design an AI agent which has several tools. Could be an Excel processing tool, could be a browser tool, could be 10 different things. But you can build, say, for example, a claims processing agent and give this taskbot or this agent that you just built in a taskbot interface as one of the tools for the claims processing agent. And then whenever the agent determines that now it needs to go create an invoice, it has a ready-made tool available to go and perform that activity without you doing a whole lot of heavy lift and shift. So let me take a pause here. That was a lot that we just covered. Any immediate questions in the chat?
Yes, so we have a few. UI agents can read local PDF files.
As long as it opens in the browser, you can. The which is so right now the UI agent capability that we have delivered is the context of it or its lifespan basically resides inside a browser. So if you're opening it through Chrome, it can read it. If it opens in any of the thick client applications, say PDF Reader, the agent will not have access to it. That for those kind of situations, you have three options. Either you use document automation, or you use traditional RPA-based automations that I believe we have existing command packages to read a PDF as well. You can also basically build an AI skill, take the PDF, throw it into one of the agents, sorry, into one of the large language models. That model can infer that information for you and send the response back. Uh, or you can basically open the PDF inside the browser, which is, it's just a default application change that you will want to do in your machine. And if it opens inside the browser, then the agent has the ability to access it and can read it. So several different options depending on what your use case looks like. I will say this. Ideally, you want to use the agent for PDF-based tasks or reading PDF, preferably if it's like a single page or a two-page kind of a structure. If your PDF is complex, if you're dealing with multiple PDFs, document automation is still better suited for it because a lot of optimization in terms of lower cost, higher fidelity, performance, that entire engineering to make sure that it runs in a scalable, reliable manner uh, for your large workloads, that's something that's already been built into document automation. For single page extraction, especially in scenarios that we just saw, you absolutely can use agent as long as you're able to access the PDF through the browser.
So with that, the agent could read a scanned PDF file as well,
Yes.
or okay, perfect. And then does a UI agent session retain an ever-growing history of messages until the session close command, or just n-x of the messages for the duration of the session to facilitate the current action to take?
It keeps the history is retained till the time the context of run action is live. So the way we have designed this intentionally is that one of the most common mistakes we've seen, and this is true for not just UI agents, but even AI agents in general, is an overloading of a prompt. What ends up happening is users typically type in a very large prompt inside one single execution goal. Now that's fine in terms of execution if you are by design intending for a human to be overseeing that execution, which is why a very large prompt is fine for a ChatGPT-like interface where a human is always in the loop. But if you're doing an unattended execution, reliability is an important aspect. Performance is an important aspect. Therefore, typing in a big prompt doesn't really make sense. It actually reduces the overall performance and accuracy of the agent at runtime. Therefore, the recommendation is to break your big goal down into logical and smaller chunks, which means in this framework, you can add in multiple run actions in the same browser context. So you can chain different goals uh, within the context of the same browser session. You can also weave in, like I said, different kinds of actions inside the same browser session. If you want to operate multiple browsers, that's also possible. You just need to start a different session, which means, and this is something, like I said, we have improved upon Recorder. You can actually have two different browsers open parallelly, and you can have an agent run between them or oscillate between them based on different use cases, right? So you may have a use case where you say, read data from browser one and directly enter that in browser two, which in the past was not possible because that meant that you had to read data from browser one, save it in an interim format like in Excel, and then open browser two and then enter data over there. But now that requirement goes away. You can actually using UI agents do both simultaneously. So as long as the run action, uh, rather the chat history is available within the context of the run action. Once the run action completes and it moves to the run action, we clear the previous chat history to avoid context poisoning and avoid reduction of the overall accuracy of the agent.
Okay, can we add variables in the prompt for dynamic inputs?
Yes, you can add variables, and by the GA release, you will also have the ability to provide secure variables, which means that in several cases of, in enterprise scenarios, it's very common. You're passing credentials to log into an application, or you may have sensitive content that you may not want to provide directly to a model. And that's something we fully recognize, right? So we did intentionally build a framework wherein you can configure your variables in such a manner that if it's dynamically, if it needs to be dynamically passed, that's a straight up framework, which means I think I have that example in fact, rather than talking in hypotheticals. Let's see. Yeah, over here. So the previous output that we got from the first action was actually a JSON that we captured in a variable, and we are passing that as a variable in the second action. So that's one example in which you can pass dynamic input. And you don't see this right now, but we have a secure variables property also available, which means you can mask the content of those specific variables from the model. All the model will do at that stage is identify where it needs to interact with the browser section. Maybe there's a data field, maybe there's a button. It only identifies where to interact with. The actual data entry itself is masked completely from the model. Uh, and I'm looking at the questions now. Can we perform data extraction from PDF that has multiple invoices? Yes, you can. Same example that we saw just now. Is it better to use document automation or UI agent? Like I said, if it's a single PDF, single page PDF, you might as well use UI agent. That's good enough. The consideration is not can you or can't you. The short answer is you can. Your consideration is what's the scale you're running it? What's the cost considerations you need to keep in mind? Do you want distributed workload or do you need to do a single threaded execution like what we just saw? All of those are considerations which will determine whether you can use or whether you want to use agent vis-a-vis document automation.
Okay,
In terms of functionality, you can do both.
UI agents output can be passed to one task to another task.
Yes, that's basically what we just did, right? So I
Mhm.
had my first task where I was reading content from the PDF. So I basically went to a website. I asked it to open an invoice and read the content. In my second task, I'm passing that content as input and asking it to create an invoice for that.
Okay, so think we answered that one. Can we perform data extraction from PDF that has multiple invoices in it? You answered that one. Um,
Yes.
most modern websites serve dynamic personalized content that varies based on logged in users' profile and cookie data. In this context, how do UI agents handle enterprise use cases where they need to extract accurate user-specific content from these websites?
So normally that happens in two different fashions. Either the user's login credentials determine what the user gets to see. In which case, if that's the experience that you want the agent also to see, then you mimic a credential for the agent to log in and then see the same UI. The other possibility is that, and this is largely true for SSO-based applications, applications that are run within your own intranet, or even SaaS-based applications that have user context stored and you're logging in over there. Basically, you want to be able to use the user's context to see or perform activities. So a good use case for this is, say, travel booking, where you want to go to uh, any of your travel booking website that's provisioned for your company, and that usually has your context or your profile information already available. Now, for those scenarios, your runtime execution environment becomes important. If you want your runtime to be running in a remote environment, which does not have any knowledge of what the user context is, what the user profile is, then you need to use a credential that has the user profile already available. We do not use cookie data or any other information that may be available for the user. The second option that you have, which probably is recommended for scenarios like travel booking. Again, I'm using that as an example because everybody understands it, but you can extrapolate that. If you have a scenario where you want to open an application in the user's context, then ideally should run on the user's local machine. Now, if it's human in the loop, you can run the agent in the user's local machine by having that agent run in the foreground, where the browser opens on in front of the user can see it. If that's not desirable for whatever reason, you can run the agent in a PIP mode, right? That's a existing capability that Automation Anywhere platform provides. You can do picture in picture, which means it just creates another Windows session on the same machine. It has all the context and all the profile information of the user. So if it opens, say, SAP as an example, and again, using that for travel booking, but let's say it opens the SAP's travel portal, then the same user context is still applicable. It logs in, the agent will log in using the user context or user profile on that application, and it sees exactly what a user would see if they were to log in manually. So those are the options that you have available.
Okay, does it still the mouse and keyboard when running attended on machines?
No.
And then we have a couple more. Do you want to hold those until you get through what you're about to show?
Sure, but I
Okay.
think there was a question on URL which I did want to address. In the current framework that you see, and this is a bit dated version, in this version you see URL is mandatory. In the GA version, we have made URL optional, which means that when you're chaining different goals together or different tasks together, you only need to provide the URL the first time that the browser or the web application needs to be opened up. Any subsequent run action or the goal that you provide, if you do not provide a URL, the framework will assume that you want that goal to be executed on the same website that's already open. If you do provide a URL, it will open up that URL first and then execute the goal. So that problem has been solved in the GA version. Okay, let's go back to our presentation. Oops. All right, so that's our demo. And just to summarize, in terms of the key features, you already saw, the action models like Automation Event Narada and Nova Act. Uh, and one of the differences between Automation Event Narada versus Nova Act is also its ability to understand different modalities. We saw in the example demo that I just ran, which was run using Automation Anywhere Narada, it was reading both DOM and doing vision-based activities like reading PDF seamlessly. On the other hand, Nova Act has only DOM-based capabilities. Any other model that we plug in the future, may have or may not have both of these capabilities. So each action model has its strengths and weaknesses. That's something, like I said, we'll provide in the documentation. But the goal eventually is that you have a list of options that you can pick from. If you are, biased towards Amazon because you're an existing Amazon customer, great, you have Novak to work with. If you are more interested in accuracy, fidelity, especially over long-running workflows, Automation anyway, Narada is probably a better bet. If your cost profile is important, meaning you want to keep the cost as optimized as possible, having a framework where you're using both recorder and UI agent together is again an option that we made available. So there are different lenses to look at this from. It all depends on what your core requirements are, and you have different options available through UI agents for those different requirements. So that's the first capability that we're providing. And like I said, we are integrating UI agent within the existing platform, which means that you can seamlessly weave in both browser-based and non-browser activities in one single control plane. That gives you the benefit of the same learning curve, or in fact, shorter learning curve. Your ability to get upskill or onboarding a different user on this technology stack is practically same or better. uh, we have taken great efforts to make sure that governance and guardrails are, by default integrated. That was actually a number one requirement for us before we were going GA. So guardrails in terms of secure variables, you being able to mask sensitive content from the model, especially for sensitive sectors like healthcare, that's something that we have factored in already. Audit trails are also available in the form of output file, which means that you can get output traces of what the agent did at runtime. You also get clear output, clear notifications and traces on what the actual output was of the agent in that given step. How many steps did it take? What was the result? What was the time it took? Tokens consumed? All of that information is already available as part of the agent's output. And by the next release, and this is not happening in .40, but by .41, which is late summer, we will also plug this entire audit trail back in the audit logs, which means that whether you are, as a COE sitting inside the automation anyway control room, or you're operating as a citizen developer, you'll have the same capabilities and the same control and management plane available across the board. And then finally, and this is a continuous journey for us, which is making sure that we are uh, choosing the right action models in the dropdown that you just saw. Right now, you see Automation Anywhere, Narada, and Amazon Nova Act. That's intentional. We, based on our benchmarks and evaluations that we have done intentionally, what we have really seen is that not every model out there is fit for purpose. While there are several examples that exist, they all fail in one or the other factors, like performance, fidelity over long-running executions, human in the loop framework enablement, or ability to mask contain, governance and cartridge. There's something or the other that ends up being a trade-off, and therefore we have intentionally chosen not to add every single possible option out there, but rather be a bit more cautious and make sure that it meets all the enterprise scenarios and requirements that we have set forth. Uh, there was a question on common use cases beyond what we just saw. So this is something that we've been seeing, and we've been in a private preview slash GA phase for the past 7 months, and been working with several customers across different scenarios. The patterns of use cases that I've seen are really fit within these four categories. Uh, Either you can, one of the use cases that we have that we've seen is automated QA and release testing. This is typically an IT scenario. IT teams, either embedded within business or a core IT team, they do application testing very frequently, functional testing of applications, not necessarily backend or API-based testing, but where you want to run a certain transaction on a UI and make sure everything's working as expected. This is more a functional UAT kind of testing, and you can actually automate that through UI agents. We had a couple of customers where we have done very successful engagements with them, where we have been able to automate the entire workload. Say, for example, automating job candidate onboarding on Workday, or doing benefits administration on a legacy platform where you have lots of JavaScripts and custom forms and iframes that you're dealing with. Pretty successful, long running, very heavy duty and very heavily human in the loop involved use case that we've been able to successfully deploy. A second use case that we've seen is market research. There are several examples that exist out there. If you go to YouTube, you'll find this very easily, where you have an agent which is scanning different content in the internet and providing you a detailed list of report. The thumb rule or the nuance to understand there is, if your content is accessible out there in a Wikipedia style format where you have a single page, or think of like a blog article where everything's available on a single page or couple of pages, very neatly structured. There's no paywall, no authentication that you're dealing with. It's publicly accessible content. You don't need UI agent for that. You can basically have a web scraper. In fact, you can probably write a web scraper in Python and just let it run, crawl that website, get the content, feed that to an AI skill or LLM, and just give the insight for you. It's as simple as that. But in enterprise scenarios, that's not what you're dealing with. You're dealing with applications that are sitting behind an authentication. You're dealing with applications or content that's sitting behind a search functionality, or you're dealing with applications that are sitting behind a paywall. Those are applications or those are websites and content that your scrapers or crawlers cannot access. You also are dealing with content that are not readily accessible until you perform a certain action on that website. In those scenarios, you do need UI agents, and we again have several customers where we are doing some very extensive implementation of market research using UI agents. A most common example that we have seen, and this is like your RPA use case, which is processing or doing form filling entries by navigating different web pages. Now, from contrasting this on RPA, if you're dealing with, say, one website, RPA is a better bet. Say you're doing payment processing or invoice entry, if you're dealing with just one website, RPA still is a better bet. If you're dealing with five, I would still say RPA. If you're dealing with 10, 20, 100, 1,000, RPA becomes extremely difficult, not because the build effort is extensive. I mean, that is true largely. Build effort is extensive, but it's still a one-time effort. But your maintenance, especially when you're dealing with public websites, becomes a nightmare as your scale of websites that you need to run on increases. That's where UI agents again becomes a very powerful capability because you can, just as you saw before, you can write your goal once. If you're doing payments processing across 1,000 different vendor portals, you can write your goal once in the form of a prompt, and the agent figures out at runtime how it needs to operate across, how it needs to do payment processing on vendor one's website versus vendor two's website versus vendor thousand's website within the same beam without you doing any additional intelligence or configuration around it. And then finally, we've seen use cases where you want to do data reconciliation between two different systems. So the example that I gave earlier, where you want to open two different websites, compare and contrast the data between them, and maybe copy data from website A to website B or vice versa, all within the same control plane and within the same framework that I showed earlier. These are all the use cases that you can basically do with UI agents. And this is an ever-growing list. These are the most four common patterns I've seen of all the different customer engagements we've had in the last couple of months. I'm sure we'll see more as we start scratching the surface and roll this out to our customers.
Yeah, speaking of that, Pratyush, I'm going to launch a poll, and this is going to give you all, the attendees, access to potentially taking part in that. So the first question, are you interested in learning more about this feature and having a CSM reach out once available? And then question two is, are you interested in taking part in the preview of this tool? So if so, just click yes. We'll pull your information from the attendee list and get this set up for you. Now, as people are answering those questions, Pratyush, did you want to answer the question about the potential licensing, how this will work?
Yes. So short answer, yes, this is a license capability. And depending on whether you are an Amazon customer or rather whether you want to use Nova Act or whether you want to use Automation Anywhere Narada, your licensing structure can potentially change. That's something we can discuss. I would really say, like I said, short answer, it is a license capability. For getting the exact commercials, please do reach out to your account rep. While we do have a default licensing structure and pricing packaging in place, that's something that we do work with every customer based on our relationship. We can come up with a more conducive pricing based on the use cases and the broader context of what really needs to be done.
Okay, and I think we have room for one more question. Um,
So there's a
think,
question on Amazon Nova being US restricted. It was US restricted up until December.
mhm.
Now it is GA, and Amazon on their side is making it available through Bedrock, which means even outside US, you should be able to access Amazon Nova Act. So largely regional availability for both of these models, Automation Anywhere Narada and Amazon Nova Act is global. Uh, if there are I think one thing to keep in mind is while the models are accessible outside US, the data centers from where these models are provisioned vis-a-vis the regulatory regime that you are operating in based on the geography you're sitting in can potentially differ. So that's something to be mindful of. But in terms of you being able to access the model outside US, that's already in place.
Great. And suppose we have a multi-page PDF containing many tables. Can we extract multiple tables from the PDF while preserving their table format?
Yeah, you can. And that's, I would really say that's a perfect use case for document automation. UI agent can also do that. But like I said, if you have multiple tables on a single page PDF, I would I would say UI agent is better suited for that. But the moment you get into multi-page PDFs, you also have to deal with scrolling, figuring out whether you're in the right page or not, combining between different pages. That's not necessarily an intelligence that UI agent has, but that's intelligence that's available in document automation already. So your better bet is to use document automation for multi-page PDFs or more complex layouts where you want to draw some sort of relationship between different pages and infer some insights from there.
Mhm. And last week I ran a product club over document automation. So I'm going to create a recap and send this out to everyone who attended. And I will link that session in the recap so you can sort of compare and contrast to see which opportunity would call for which tool. All right. Any more questions? While I'm waiting on that, Pratyush, thank you so much. This was really eye-opening and it was easy for me to understand. So I'm excited about that and I can't wait to see this in action. It doesn't look like we have any other questions. So thank you all for joining. If you selected yes on either question from the poll, we will be reaching out. We will write up a recap of this session and send it out to everyone in attendance. Thank you all so much for joining, and I hope you scan the QR code. If not, copy and paste those links that I shared, and we will see you at our next upcoming events. Bye,
Awesome. Thanks,
everyone.
everyone. Thanks, Lou.